Hey, you've discovered the Audio Variety Show, Episode 3. We want to give a big shout out to our sponsor for this week, Beef Teriyaki. Is it a snack? Is it sports gear? Yes, indeed. Beyond these doors is another dimension, a dimension of sound, where every song you've ever heard was written by the Doors. You've crossed into the bright midnight zone. Alright, so that was weird. I think the weirdest part of piercing through the door into another dimension is the fact that it came with its own introduction. So, as you might expect, I've been looking into this. I've been reaching out to people. Not a lot of people have gotten back to me, but I did get this one particular voicemail. Let me play it for you.
Hello, Cameron. My name is Leo Pigwater of the Southeast Paranormal Tracking and Investigation Company, or Skeptic. And I would like to offer you a partnership with your show in which you talk about us and we get exposure through your program, and in exchange we will offer you any free services that you might like, and we will give you content among the people who choose to send us their paranormal experiences. If you are interested in this, please contact me at Leo Paranormal at AOL.com, or call me back at this number. Thank you.
So, as you can imagine, with strange days upon us, as is the case right now, I went ahead and I called this guy back. Check it out.
Hello?
Hey, Leo. It's Cameron with Audio Variety Show. What's up?
Well, hello. I'm glad that you are returning my phone call.
Yeah, no problem. Actually sound like a pretty good deal. When do you think you'd be able to start working this stuff out?
Well, I was thinking this weekend maybe we could take you on an exhibition out into the woods nearby where you live. And I was thinking that way you could consider yourself an actual client of the Southeast Paranormal Tracking and Investigation Company.
Yeah, sure. That'll work. So what are we looking for? Bigfoot?
No, unfortunately, I hate to be the one to explain, but in our experience, we have learned that Bigfoot does not exist.
Oh, really? How'd you figure that out?
We have never seen one.
Okay. All right. So what are we looking for?
In this case, in your area, we are looking for the Eastern Chupacabra.
The Eastern Chupacabra.
Yeah. Unlike its more famous predecessor, the Eastern Chupacabra is in the eastern United States in a more woodland environment.
All right. Cool. So how do we find one?
Well, they mostly feed on roadkill, so they are not difficult to find.
Okay. So it's less of an expedition and more we're just kind of gonna drive some back roads.
That is correct, actually.
Wow. That's a little anticlimactic from compared to what I was expecting here.
Well, being as you are not a professional and it is your first time in the field, we decided to keep things as simple as possible.
Okay. I mean, can we at least get out, look around, maybe?
Maybe, just maybe, because you got to know the Eastern Chupacabra is a very dangerous creature.
All right, duly noted. But it sounds like fun. So, what does the Eastern Chupacabra look like?
Well, the Eastern Chupacabra is similar to a dog except often a bit bigger, and it's got gray to brown to sometimes tan looking fur, and it's got little pointy teeth and little pointy ears.
Like a coyote?
Well, the eastern chupacabra is a very distinct creature that is often heard howling in the evening.
So like a coyote.
It, I will be in touch about this weekend. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Looking forward to. Hello? Okay. Bye. So, I should be going out with the Southeast Paranormal Tracking and Investigation Company this week. That means next week I'll give you an update on what happened. So let's get back to the normal course of the show here. I'm sure that's a lot more entertaining than this craziness that's going on. The song of the week is The Unidentified Flying Tuna Trot by REO Speedwagon. This song is an instrumental on their 1978 album, You Can Tune a Piano, But You Can't Tune a Fish. This is the same album that brought songs like Time for Me to Fly and Rollin' with the Changes. Rollin' with the Changes is in fact the reason I bought this particular album. I wanted to explore REO Speedwagon, so I was like, okay, I'm going to get whichever album has Rollin' with the Changes on it. But song of the week, I like to draw attention to songs I don't hear people talking about very often. So this is an instrumental on that album called The Unidentified Flying Tuna Trot. I am not going to go through the members of REO Speedwagon. These days there's one founding member remaining, I believe. And it's one of those bands where they just keep having a revolving door of members. And the actual makeup of the band is not the big selling point. And it's a fun album in general. I think you should check out the entire album. You Can Tune a Piano, But You Can't Tune a Fish. And this week's song of the week is The Unidentified Flying Tuna Trot by REO Speedwagon. All right, let's do a top 10 list. Today we're going to do my top 10 favorite YouTube channels at the moment. You know how YouTube works, it could change any second now. But right now, these are the 10 channels that I find most interesting. Number 10, Shady Cicada. This guy does music. He makes original music. He makes things like boss battle themes for video games and anime openings and random mood themes for different levels in video games, and and they're always instrumental and they're always really cool. Check him out, Shady Cicada. I think he's primarily a guitar player, but he does all the work. 9, 10-second songs. This is run by a guy named Anthony Vincent. He does different songs in the style of artists who did not originally perform those songs. Number 8, Decker Shadow. He reviews movies, mostly horror movies. And he doesn't really just review them. He takes you all the way through the movie in about 20 minutes. And there are plenty of movies that I'm kind of curious about, but I don't know if I want to spend the entire 2 hours and the money it takes to watch them when I'm not sure if they're going to be good or not. So often I'll just watch what he has to say about it. Number 7, Midnight's Edge. They talk about movies. They talk about the movie business. And they try to look as deep as they can into the behind-the-scenes stuff in the movie business. And I don't know how accurate their reporting is, but they admit they're just trying to figure things out and piece things together. So it's fun to listen to them talk about how they see things. All right, number 6, JX's Sin Sins. Just like Cinema Sins, this guy mostly takes Cinema Sins videos and he points out why they're terrible and why they are not a good thing and specific annoying things in CinemaSins videos. And I get the impression he has a slightly more favorable attitude towards CinemaSins than I do, but he is absolutely brutal to them, so it works for me. Number 5, Auralnauts. They are only this low because they do not post very often anymore. but they will impose special effects on things that did not originally have special effects. They will re-edit movies such as Star Wars into completely different genres and voice over them. They do all kinds of goofy stuff where they manipulate music and movies that have already been produced, and they change them into something else by manipulating them, and it's hilarious. Number 4, Frog Leap Studios. This is a guy who does metal covers of everything, but his name is Leo Moracchioli. A name very similar to a name you'll hear a little later, but these names developed completely independently. But this guy takes, sometimes he just, like I think his most recent video at the time of this recording is Battery by Metallica. So sometimes he just takes a hard song and just covers it. But he takes all kinds of goofy songs and turns them into metal. And he sings and plays all the instruments himself, so that's also fun to see. Number 3 is Steve Terraberry. Stevie T is a guitar player. He's an insanely good guitar player, and he has this ridiculous over-the-top sense of humor that lets him basically make fun of everything, but he does it in such an over-the-top way that I don't think it really bothers anybody, because I think that's because they don't manage to watch it. They get so turned off in the first 10 seconds by his absolute insanity that they don't watch it. I'll admit it took him a minute to grow on me. I came for the music, and I stayed because the overall product started to appeal to me. Number 2, Professor Geek. This guy is a literature professor who likes to talk about comic books and explain where these stories come from, the symbolism and the mythology and the folk tales and the recurring themes that make up long-lasting stories, stories that people like from generation to generation. And he's specifically talking about comic books and how these comic books are put together from these broader archetypes and themes that we like that everyone likes, that makes up a good story. And so he breaks those down for you and explains comic books from the perspective of a literature professor. And number 1, Comic Artist Pro Secrets, the channel of Ethan Van Sciver, who is a comic book artist. Currently works on an independent project called Cyberfrog Blood Honey. I don't know anything about it. I haven't checked it out yet. I might eventually. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But I do enjoy his channel. I enjoy him talking about comic books. I enjoy him talking about silly things that people try to turn comic books into. He's funny. He has interesting guests to share the channel sometimes. He seems to always make good points to me. I've only discovered him recently, but he gets to be number 1 because he posts, I think, every day. If not, it's close to it. He posts a lot of videos, and they are all of good quality. So right now, he is my number 1 YouTube channel to watch. Now, I should have put on this list my own channel, the Audio Variety Show podcast YouTube channel. I did not do that because I am a humble and kind person who would not use a moment like this to profit for himself when all he's trying to do is entertain you. And that said, since you want to be entertained and I just want to entertain you, that's what matters deep in my heart. That's where my concern lies. And to that end, I think you should go to Amazon.com and you should check out my book, Ghost Town OS. It's a science fiction story. It's got monsters. It's very short. You can read it in one sitting. It's just a novella, and a very short one at that. And I never can decide whether to tell people this or not, because I think it's kind of a neat moment in the story when you figure it out. But, I got to get you in there to read it before you can find this out. So, it's got space pirates. I like the space pirates. I really do. I think you would too. So check it out on Amazon.com. That's Ghost Town OS by Cam Collins. Just because I want you to be entertained. Why are you questioning my motivations? I don't appreciate that at all. There's the drum line, so that means it's halftime. For your halftime entertainment today, we have another episode of Irradiated Koala Llama.
Koala Llama is an AVS Media production. Previously on Irradiated Koala Llama, the United States Navy asked government scientist Dr. Alexander Markham to investigate the emergence of a 50-foot-tall radioactive koala llama hybrid. Markham immediately knew the perfect person to lead the investigation, world-renowned animal expert Cassandra Pierce. Dr. Pierce, I presume.
Please, call me Sandy.
Alexander Markham, Bureau of Anomalous Affairs.
Your acronym is...
No. Maybe. That is unfortunate.
What can I do for you, Dr. Markham?
I have an urgent mission for my contact in the Navy.
I like that song.
I know, right? Can you believe there are people who don't?
Urgent mission?
Right. We have reason to believe a 50-foot-tall irradiated koala llama is swimming toward the coast of California.
What?
I know it's hard to believe, but I've seen the footprints.
What are the odds that the strangest thing I've ever heard of fits nicely into all my areas of expertise? The only thing that would be more convenient is if you and I had some deep personal connection in the past.
I never curse good fortune, Sandy. The important thing for now is that we stop this monstrosity from wreaking havoc on the coast.
How much damage could a koala llama cause? Even if it stumbles through a city, you'll see it coming.
Unless the process that created this creature altered its mind into a frenzied bastion of terror and carnage.
That's dark, dude.
If there is even a 1% chance, we have to treat it as an absolute certainty.
That might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Is not?
Might be, but someone needs to look into it, so I'm in.
I'm glad to hear that. Markham! The giant irradiated koala llama has been spotted on Alcatraz! They always go for the landmarks. We're on the way, Admiral.
Not even time to pack. Well, let's get to it.
Hopefully we'll get this resolved quickly and get you back to the zoo.
If there's a zoo to come back to, we're not far away for something that size.
How will our heroes save San Francisco from this certain bastion of terror and carnage? Find out next time on Irradiated Koala Llama!
Alright, that's it for halftime. We want to thank our sponsor, Beef Teriyaki. Is it a snack? Is it sports gear? Yes, indeed. Let me read you another story, or at least the first half of one. This one is called Sal, Part 1. Sal Moricelli eased his girlfriend's Arabian to a stop. He looked up at the dark blue sky. It wasn't quite clear, but the wispy, high-altitude clouds didn't seem to threaten more snow. He considered that a good thing. The horse was already halfway to his knees in it. Under the dying light of day, Sal assessed his situation. His girlfriend's bolt-action Browning .223 was holstered against the horse's flank. The rifle was completely painted in a camouflage design, and while Sal preferred good old-fashioned wood grain, Jenny had taken more than a few deer with it over the few years he'd known her. He also wore his own 8-shot .357 Magnum on his hip. A bag full of extra ammunition for the revolver hung from his saddle. For the rifle, he only had the 6 rounds in the gun. He didn't plan to use any of it. He wore his bright orange hunting vest and similarly shaded cap, but that was just a safety precaution in case anyone else was hunting back there. There shouldn't be anyone there. It was all private property for acres upon acres, but shouldn't wasn't a guarantee. And as Sal looked at the footprints in the snow beneath him, he wasn't about to bank on having the woods to himself. He'd been following them for half an hour, and they still trailed on before him like a very single-minded school of giant white fish. He studied the long, rounded shape of the nearest print for a moment. What had him nervous was the fact that these big prints had begun just where the little prints that surely belonged to Jenny's son, Robert, had ended. He took his glove off, pulled his cell phone from his pocket, opened his contacts, and scrolled down to Jenny. The phone only rang once. "Hey," Jenny said quickly. There was so much tension in that one word, but it was also clear she was successfully keeping herself under control. "Where are you, Sal?" "Across the highway," he replied without a greeting. "Good ways into the pines. Have you found anything?" "No," Jenny said. It started as a whine, but she stifled it quickly. "Pop and I are headed back to the house. All the volunteers are trying to get in before it gets dark. I had my phone out to call the police when you called." "Do that," Sal said. "Put your grandfather on the phone first, though." "Okay," she said without questioning him. Faintly, as she handed the phone over, he heard her say, "Pop, Sal wants to talk to you." Then after a moment, "Yep." "Hey, Mr. Carvey, I found something, but I don't want to tell Jenny about it yet. Footprints in the snow. Little Robert-sized prints that turn into man-sized prints. Big man-sized prints. I'm staying on them, but I'm no tracker. Someone is back here." There was a moment of silence. Then Mr. Carvey said, "You should probably come on back. It's getting dark." "I can't do that. You wouldn't either if you were this close." "You're right," Mr. Carvey replied. "In fact, no," Sal cut him off. "By the time you get out here, it'll be dark. It's more trouble than it's worth. I'll find him." "All right, I'll tell the police everything you said. Be safe." "Safe as I can. Later." With that, he hung up and returned the phone to his pocket. He looked to the sky again, now the color of orange sherbet, but still somehow dark. His guts were roiling. He was worried about Robert, and the longer he followed the footprints, the surer he was that finding the boy would involve some kind of confrontation. But he prompted the horse forward. The footprints carried on at a steady stride, even as the brush grew thicker and the trees grew closer together. There was still plenty of room for the horse, and before long it became just enough room for the horse. It was a trail. Sal couldn't be completely sure of that, though. He was a casual hunter. He enjoyed the outdoors as much as the next guy, but he'd never devoted any time to recognizing game trails in the snow. A bird called out nearby, distracting him from his thoughts. He looked in the direction of the call, then turned his eyes back to the trail. It was getting dark fast. He reached into the saddlebag and retrieved the flashlight he'd fortunately thought to bring. He focused the light on the ground, following the steady prints. The more he traveled, the more confident he became that he was dealing with some kind of trail. The prints became more difficult to see, even with the flashlight. Sal raised the light to shine it in front of him and followed the open trail, no longer keeping an eye on the difficult-to-see footprints. He goaded the horse to pick up speed. Before long, they were actually trotting despite the limited headlight and the narrow path. Suddenly, Sal pulled back on the reins and slowed to a stop, pulling the light up into the air in the process. He lowered it back down to eye level and to his left and scanned the woods. It didn't take him a long time to find what had gotten his attention. At eye level, while sitting on horseback, he was looking at the white splintered tip of a tree as thick as his lower leg. The tree had clearly been broken, not cut. Sal felt a very hard knot forming in his stomach. He directed the light to the ground, hoping he wouldn't see what he expected. Unfortunately, the footprints did veer off right past the broken tree. Sal pulled his phone out of his pocket again. This time he called Jenny's grandfather directly. "What have we got, Sal?" Mr. Carvey asked immediately. "This is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm very serious." "Sure thing," Mr. Carvey prompted. "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" Mr. Carvey sighed. Sal could actually hear the reluctance to say anything. "Sal, get out of there." The knot in his gut went sour. "Is that a yes?" "Not exactly. Just come back now. You're no use by yourself right now. No one would be." Sal was about to reply, but something big grunted in the darkness in front of him. The hair on his neck stood tall. "There's something here." "Sal, come home. Turn the horse around and come home as fast as you can." "Has anyone found Robert?" Sal asked. He realized he was speaking quietly for some reason. Another sigh drifted over the line. No, Mr. Carvey finally said. Sal nodded, realized Mr. Carvey couldn't see the gesture, and said, "Something is right here. If it has Robert, I can't leave him." Whatever had grunted in the darkness let out a quick blowing sigh. It was big. The horse didn't seem terribly upset, though. Sal wondered if he might be imagining the whole thing. He took in a deep breath and blew it out as a thick cloud. Then, before he could change his mind, he slipped his leg over the Arabian's back and dropped to the snowy ground. "I'll call you back soon," Sal said. He hung up and slipped the phone into his pocket once again. The horse snorted and shook his head dramatically. "Hey now," Sal said, holding the reins and stroking the creature's neck. "You were fine a minute ago." That was when the thing in the trees growled. The horse whinnied and pulled away. Sal fought to keep him calm, but he quickly realized he wasn't going to keep the horse under control. So he cut his losses and grabbed the rifle from the holster along the horse's flank. The horse pulled away and took off running back toward the house. Sal stood there staring at the retreating animal and holding his borrowed rifle close to his chest. Suddenly it occurred to him that he had dropped his flashlight while snagging the rifle. He bent down and scooped it up from the snow. As he rose to his feet, the light caught just the barest glimpse of eyeshine in the woods before him. Sal stepped back involuntarily. He intentionally put his light where he'd seen the eyes, but there was nothing there. He wanted to call out to Robert, but he knew that was not the thing to do. He had a very bad feeling about the condition Robert would be in if he was even out there. Sal put the light on the broken tree and studied it for a moment. The break was well over his head, and the more he looked at it, the worse he felt about it. He was beginning to feel as useless as Mr. Carvey had indicated. Something was moving in front of him. His heart was pounding. Despite the cold of the night, sweat began to collect at his collar and beneath his arms. Mostly to comfort himself, Sal spoke to the unseen thing moving through the brush. "Look, I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I'm armed, and I have to admit that I'm a little scared, so you should speak up and then show yourself, slowly." The creature grunted again. It wasn't a person. He was confident of that part. So he backed up a few more steps, but now he was inches away from the woods on the other side of the small trail. He fought the temptation to fire blindly into the trees. Something else growled behind him. Sal spun around and glanced into the darkness, but he quickly turned back to the other side of the trail where he'd first heard the creature. He was surrounded, and he wasn't comfortable dealing with something that knew how to surround someone. He sidestepped toward home, the direction the horse had run, the direction he should have been moving before the sun set. But now it was dark in the woods. It was dark everywhere. Sal held the light out in front of him and broke into an awkward trot along the snowy ground. Something struck him from the right side. In fact, it ran right through him. He went flying through the dying undergrowth and sharp briars. He hit the ground and rolled, finding his feet with more grace than he expected. He found himself facing his attacker, and he fired blindly with the revolver. He managed to stop at one shot, even though he had no idea if he'd found his target. He didn't even know what his target was. Under the circumstances, that didn't bother him. He scrambled away from whatever had bowled him over. Branches and briars tore at his clothes and his skin. His bright orange cap slipped from his head. The butt of the rifle snagged on trees as he passed by, but the weapon remained on his back. He tripped and found himself face first in the wet snow. This time, he didn't bother to look back. He just rushed to his feet and kept running. Just as he thought his heart was about to burst, the trees actually gave way to what almost resembled a small yard. The effect was made complete by the utterly unexpected cabin standing directly in front of him. Any reservations he might have had about the cabin were overrun by his fear of the things behind him, so he ran straight for the front door. He pounded on the wooden door with the flashlight hand and held onto his revolver with the other. "Hey, don't shoot! I've got animals chasing me! Please, let me in!" No one responded, but he could hear something big moving through the foliage behind him. He tried the knob, and the door opened easily, swinging open inward with a slight creak. Sal scanned the single room quickly with his light and scrambled inside. He shut the door behind him, locked the bolt, and began exploring his surroundings. There were windows on each side of the door, but the amount of light they let in was just enough for him to distinguish the window from the wall. A bed sat in one corner, while a fireplace graced the opposite wall. Fresh-looking wood was stacked near the brick hearth. Sal looked out the nearest window and turned the flashlight off. It was impossible to see anything outside, so he stood there blind in the dark. It didn't take long before he wasn't comfortable, so he turned the light back on and tried to keep it facing away from the windows. He found another door across the room from the fireplace near the bed. He made his way across the room and knocked. "Hey, if anybody's here, we're in trouble," he said. The door opened without much effort. Sal pushed it inward, shining the light before him. Something moved inside the room, and Sal jumped away from the door, raising his revolver toward the shape. It didn't take long to realize he had been startled by his own reflection. Under other circumstances, he might have felt embarrassed. As it was, he was understandably on edge. The mirror was at eye level because the tiny offshoot was a bathroom. Sal scanned it quickly, found it empty and useless, and turned his attention back to the main room. Less than 5 feet away, with nothing but glass between them, stood the thing that had knocked him off the trail. Its face was pressed against the window, and he could see a good bit of the body. He couldn't make out the color in the dark, but it was covered in hair, and had the shoulder and arm of a human being. The face was distinctly not human. Huge lips curled into an animal snarl. The narrow eyes stared at him with undeniable intelligence and hatred. The creature blew out a long breath on the glass, fogging it before his face. Sal raised the gun with no intention of shooting until the creature made a move, but it disappeared from view. He reached awkwardly across his body and pulled his phone from his pocket while still pointing the gun at the dark window. He found Mr. Carvey's number without taking his eyes off the window. One ring found a connection. "Sal!" Mr. Carvey practically shouted. "What's going on? Robert, I need help!" Sal said with more calm than he imagined possible. "Something's chasing me," he explained. "Animals, big animals. I ended up in some kind of cabin. I didn't even know I was out here. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?" "Sal, there's nothing we can do, Sal," Mr. Carvey added very quietly. Sal just shook his head and squinted into the darkness. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel his pulse in his ear against the phone. Outside, something grunted, just loudly enough to be heard. "Are you there?" Mr. Carvey finally asked. "So what's out there?" Sal asked. "Have you gotten a good look at him?" "One so far. There are at least two." "What does it look like?" "Like a Bigfoot, Pop. It looks like a massive, hairy, ugly ape Bigfoot." It was Mr. Carvey's turn to remain silent. Something slammed against the back of the cabin with a loud bang. Sal whirled around, but there were no windows to the back of the building. "This is it," Sal said, even as he shoved the phone into his pocket. He holstered the pistol and slipped the rifle over his head and into his hands. He held the flashlight awkwardly in his front hand, pointing it wherever the weapon was aimed. The grip was cold in his bare right hand. As he turned back to the window, he found the creature looking at him once again, but it pulled its head away immediately this time. Sal thought he was going to throw up, but he took in a long, deep breath to steady both his bowels and his nerves. Overhead, a repetitive pattering sound got his attention. It quickly changed to a creak, creak, shuffle, creak, creak, shuffle. Sal looked up at the ceiling. He raised the gun and the light until he was looking at the single long beam supporting the roof. There was no visual sign, but the creaking sound continued. At the same time that something crashed down violently on the roof, something else slapped the front of the building. Sal turned his attention back to the window, but there was nothing to see. He trailed the gun along the wall, studying the room carefully. He confirmed the one door, 2 windows, and no other exits. He also found the light switch next to the door. "No way," he muttered. He approached the switch slowly, keeping an eye out in all directions, bracing himself against the next animal call or wooden bang. While he was there, he realized he hadn't even locked the door yet. He was grateful the creatures weren't able to open doors, or at least hadn't tried, so he reached up and closed the latch. He slipped his hand beneath all the switches by the door and flipped them on. The lights were nearly blinding. Not just inside the cabin, but massive floodlights came to life outside as well. Sal peeked out the window just in time to see something large drop from the roof and land several yards away in the middle of the snow-covered yard. Sal aimed his rifle instinctively, but as he saw muscles moving easily beneath the fur of the creature's humongous back, he wondered if the weapon would even have an effect. The gray-white colored monster disappeared into the trees and stayed out of the range of the lights. Sal gave it a second to see if the creatures would return. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket again. The call had apparently stayed connected the entire time, because as he raised the phone to his ear, Mr. Carvey was urgently asking him what he was doing and what was happening. What in the world am I looking at? Sal said into the receiver. And where am I? This place has power in the middle of nowhere. It's not a cabin, Mr. Carvey said. It's more like an outpost. Close the shutters. What? There are 2 windows, right? Mr. Carvey growled. Close the shutters. Sal did as he was told and found the shutters to be incredibly heavy. They banged into place as he pulled them away from the wall and closed them over the window. He stepped back to look at his handiwork and found a cross shape cut into the now closed windows. He'd seen enough westerns to know it wasn't a religious symbol, it was an opening for shooting outward. For some reason, the revelation this was some kind of fortress designed for combat was much more surreal than the monster outside. Monsters, he thought to himself. Don't forget there are 2, at least 2. But the idea of an outpost on his girlfriend's family land, that one was making his head hurt more than the cold and more than the fearful pounding of his heart. Okay, he said into the phone, still holding the rifle in a half-ready, one-handed grip. Windows are shut. I see I can still shoot outside if I need to. Save your ammo as much as you can, Mr. Carvey said. Do what you have to, but if you get a calm, clean shot, go for the head. That doesn't help me stay calm, Sal replied. Have you seen these things move? He caught himself. Of course you have. You're telling me about killing them at the outpost. So what am I dealing with? I'm sorry, Sal, Mr. Carvey said with obvious strain in his voice. We thought they were gone. You'll be safe in the cabin. Just keep your guard up. Sal took in a long breath and tried to steady his racing heart. A flat, wrinkled face had pressed up against the glass of the window and was barely visible through the cross pattern. Sal backed away from the barricaded window as calmly as he could manage. Suddenly there was a bang on the heavy front door. Sal flinched. Something howled outside, but not at the door. He was certain the creatures outside were driving home the point that he was surrounded. If it was supposed to scare him, it was working. Then the lights went off. Mr. Carvey, Sal said into the phone. His voice was quiet, not because he didn't want to be heard, but because it was all he could muster. The power is out. That's not possible. I checked the generator not even a week ago. Yeah, Sal said calmly. Well, go to the bathroom. There's a small window in there. Look out at the shed and tell me what you see. Sal did as he was told. There's something moving out there, he said. Clever, Mr. Carvey muttered. He didn't sound happy. None of this makes any sense. Did these things take Robert, Mr. Carvey? Sal asked. I hope not. I desperately hope not. Look, Sal, with the power off, the seals won't work. Seals won't work? Sal briefly imagined a marine mammal wearing a hard hat and holding a picket sign. It wasn't funny. It wasn't welcome. But he had no frame of reference for too many things he was experiencing. Something moved on the roof, causing it to creak loudly. Sal stepped back into the main room. He had the dim light from the bathroom window behind him and the even dimmer light of the barricaded windows before him. But he couldn't even register the layout of the room, let alone figure out what was going on around him. Then the closest window exploded. The shutters flew open unwillingly with a shrill bang, and a giant mass flew through the open space right at him. Sal jumped to the side, back into the bathroom, dropping both the rifle and the phone in the process. He stepped forward cautiously, and only recognized what he was looking at by the clues attached. The saddle was still there, and the bag of .357 ammunition, which was clipped to the saddle by a carabiner. He was looking at the remains of his girlfriend's horse, minus the legs and head. Even in the dark, he could see the blood collecting beneath the body. Something moved to his right, toward the window, and he didn't look to see what it was. He backed into the bathroom, slammed the door, and locked it. Even as he did, he knew it was useless against something that could toss the corpse of a horse through a window. So he waited with his mind racing, desperately needing some kind of plan of action. Outside in the main room, Sal Moricelli's attackers slipped easily through the open window. The first raised himself to his full height slowly, making sure there was enough room for his massive frame. The hair standing on his head just grazed the ceiling. The second creature, slightly shorter but just as muscular and hairy, stepped in behind him. The second creature approached the bathroom door immediately. He lowered himself nimbly to one knee and examined the fallen rifle and cell phone. He picked up the rifle, bent the barrel with a simple, effortless motion, and tossed the weapon aside. The phone he picked up delicately and put to the side of his head, where his small ears lay under his hair. he heard Mr. Carvey on the other end frantically trying to reach Sal. Sal, are you still there? What's going on? What's all the noise? What are the ogres doing? Sal, the creature said in a deep, smooth voice. Inside the bathroom, Sal fought the urge to scream. Sal can't come to the phone right now, the creature said slowly. I'd be happy to take a message. Thus concludes another episode of the Audio Variety Show. If you have any feedback, feel free to email at audiovarietyshow@outlook.com. And if you would like to share any paranormal experiences with Leo Pigwater and the Southeast Paranormal Tracking and Investigation Company, you can send an email to leoparanormal@aol.com. leoparanormal@aol.com. We're both looking forward to hearing from you. If you had fun today, check us out next week.